What's going here? A little bit out of focus. I don't know if we can.
I'm getting something flashing here on mine. The show. Okay. Okay, I had a photo, like. Is right there good? Better?
Yeah, this is how it's looking.
Out of frame? Am I okay right there?
Yeah. And if you want to share your screen.
Yep, let me see here. Oh, wait. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Are you hearing through this too, through my,
Yeah, you're the, so you gotta make sure your audio is.
my audio is on for the Zoom? I just want to make sure. Yeah, okay. I just wasn't sure if there's anything else.
Which one did she say was the other one to connect to?
I couldn't hear you if you were talking to me.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's all right. I can do this.
I'm just getting used to the.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. So it'd be defending in March or so?
Hopefully like November.
Oh, wow, that fast.
Yeah,
You gotta write 3 chapters, give it to your committee, have them review it, make corrections.
I'd be to submit by November, so I'll be done by December, I hope.
Oh, wow. And then what?
And then, whatever I can do. No, it's been too long of a process so far, but
Yeah.
it's been an up and down situation there, so. They're all on board for my speed now at the end. The chapters are the easy part, that was getting everything organized, and you'll see the little disjointedness in what I have today.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work on right now. A lot of historical work I did in chapters 2 and 3, that took so long.
Who's your major professor?
By Erica
Erica?
Bullock. She's relatively new in CNI.
She who you started with?
No, person I started with, Melissa Bryden, moved off.
She left.
Yeah, she left.
To Colorado.
Mhm.
Unhappily.
Mhm. Yep. She was really helpful. I was really disappointed when she left.
Yeah, she's good. Well. It's on.
Okay. Oh. All right.
That's pretty good that you didn't go follow her out there. Over.
I didn't, well, I came out here with Kate. Kate took a job out here, so
Well,
I didn't move out here just specifically. So, yeah.
good way to do it. I don't know how anybody's gonna afford graduate school in the future with that. Significant other. Makes real.
It's impossible, I think. I don't know. Yeah.
So this is what the this is the YouTube stream. It's about 20 seconds behind the Facebook.
Okay, cool.
And then,
You got like
what
everything.
concerns me about that is, it doesn't have. Can you share screen again?
Yeah.
So I see post-World War II there with the
Mhm,
lower left.
mhm.
About when did things start happening with kids and stuff?
Science wise or just toy wise? Yeah, so I'm gonna start with right around the Enlightenment and the way that uh it was decided that kids were ready for science in certain ways. And um a writer by the name of Tom Telescope,
Wow.
who was actually John Newbery of the Newbery Award, started writing books geared towards kids about science.
So
And
Tom Telescope is actually John Newberry?
Yep.
And did they name the award after him or did he find it?
the award, I don't know where the award came in, but I just made that connection of those two, of
They're the same.
the same person.
Person.
Yeah, and just that idea of science for kids, the idea of childhood around the Enlightenment era and things, and going into some of the educational ideas of the Enlightenment today, and then jumping right into rational toys and hands-on learning and things like that. So, and then jumping a little ways to into the 1800s, 1900s, and what was starting to happen in education and delinquent children. And the atomic energy lab, you probably remember this with the radium in it, and the Geiger counters and all that good stuff. I wanted to do a whole chapter on toy safety and the safety standards of the 70s, which kind of changed a lot of what we were able to do.
Okay, so now we're gonna try this. I'm trying to get to this holy grail for quite a while.
Man, you're a master of all this stuff.
Kay was right here to laugh at that.
Better than I could do.
Oh, no, no, no.
The guest speaker here last night and Jim must have recorded it and you can just barely hear the audio.
Who was the guest speaker?
Jonathan Rabelski from chemistry.
Did you speak on?
It was a weird topic, like harmony
Good.
and astronomy and I don't know, it was strange thing.
I hope to out-weird him today.
So we walk out of here going, oh, that was weird.
That was strange. What a strange person. They let him around kids to be a teacher there.
So were you a classroom teacher?
I was back in New Jersey.
What grade?
I taught middle school and high school, all the sciences in middle school and biology, genetics, anatomy and physiology in high school.
That's a tough age.
Oh, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I just really found my it was just I worked beforehand as an ice cream salesman for Ben and Jerry's distribution in Philadelphia. So even though that sounds like fun, it wasn't. But I found my place in teaching. It was fun.
I'm always amazed, we get groups that come in here to Space Place for programs. And I'll be thinking, I don't want to do this today, I'm tired. And once the kids get in here, it's like, you just light up.
Yeah.
It just makes your day.
It's serendipity. It really was. The energy from kids is always there. It's funny because like I get nervous talking to folks like this right now, I'll be very nervous, but with kids, it's, just natural.
I say the same thing.
Yeah.
I can go into a, group of first graders and I'm great.
Yep.
But you have a room of adults and I think, this is making me nervous.
Exactly.
You always know with kids where you stand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Whether you're going over it or whether this is, I'll tell you.
The quote from my mentor when I started working in the school I worked at was in middle school is they're there for our enjoyment, because the kids were just all over the place every day. They could be different kids, different days, and just ride the wave,
Yep.
Well, my brother just retired after maybe some years.
Yep.
Teaching 7th, 8th grade.
I move around and talk with my hands a lot, and I'm from because I'm from Jersey, right? So I got to be careful with all this stuff here.
I'm gonna try this one so that more people can see you. I'll take this a little bit so you tend to more towards the camera. It's okay. Hey, how's it going? Always use your finest material. Boogie's back. Yeah, back down. Then it's raining, he came out of it. He was go to the car wash. Hi there. I'm found that it's the late comer. Okay, thanks for introducing yourself. Yeah, come in. Are you getting the mail now? Yeah. All fine, super. Good. Got one this morning at 11 o'clock? Yeah. Yeah. Well, my wife and my daughter decided to get married, and it was a big ass production, so I took you out of town. I took you out of town for quite a while. Where'd you go? Atlanta. Oh, nice. You're real full too, right? Well, I did some professional young couple. They did ask me to open it. Did a good job on her. Yeah. And this was a mix of children of innovation and Indian immigrants. Double the size of average. What did you do in the past? Worked at IT. IT? Yeah. And I was a college teacher also. Oh, where? Eau Claire. What did you teach? Computer science. Nice. I went to PLATO. Oh, I don't think. We need to test the audio.
Okay.
Can you say something into the audio?
Yes, check 1, 2. Does that work?
Try that again.
Yep, check.
You should have it on your computer. No.
Did that work, Tom?
That's good.
Tom, did that work?
Yes,
That was okay. Okay.
It was amazing, the weather was kind of mixed. Yeah, we've been trying to get her for a while. Yeah, samples too. Green grass. Started.
Looks like everyone's on the groom's side, nobody's on the right side.
With those who left, did it-
It was about 5,000. Of course, I put this over here.
Everybody's there.
All right. What is the official time? Anybody got a reliable watch?
1 minute 2.
1 minute 2. All right, we'll do that in a little bit. Oh,
So you see the dates, yeah. Well, we got, some of my daughter's friends. Oh.
well, welcome everybody to Plato Frontiers in Life Sciences. I wanted to invite you to the special Wednesday night at the lab today, October 12th at 4 p.m. on campus on Henry Mall at 440 North Henry Mall at the Biochemical Sciences Building. The American Chemical Society has designated a national chemical historic landmark to recognize the research done on warfarin here, starting in 1933. So there's going to be a special 4 o'clock Wednesday night at the lab today. And then tonight at the regular time of 7 o'clock at the regular place of room 1111, the auditorium at 425 Henry Mall, which is the Biotech Center. Sharon Tang, Amy Zaremba, and Alicia Real are going to speak about a landscape of Wisconsin discovery, the making of a mural bridging art, science, and technology. And then next week for Wednesday night at the lab, Catherine Jackson, who's at Oxford University in the UK, will be here to talk about microheterotopias, chemistry meets glass blowing. And Tracy Dreyer, who is the master glass blower for the chemistry department, is going to co-present. Also, that one's going to be at the new chemistry edition. So if you haven't been in that building, because it basically got completed and opened in the last 2 pandemic years, it's a chance to go there. It's going to be an S429 chemistry building, and that's at 1101 University Avenue. And then for Plato, next week, we're going to have Janine Richards, who was originally scheduled to be here last week, but had to cancel because the previous week, Hurricane Ian went through Florida, and she was supposed to be in Florida looking at a house because she's going to take a faculty position in Florida in January, and the hurricane came through, so she had to delay her trip to Florida by a week. And luckily, she can be here next week to talk about shade-grown coffee and epiphyte conservation, a social ecological perspective. Does everybody know what an epiphyte is? Epiphytes are plants that grow upon plants. So like bromeliads. So if you've ever seen bromeliads hanging on trees, or Spanish moss, which is a bromeliad, but I'm embarrassing myself with my botanical knowledge. So that's what she'll be talking about. I've never seen anything on shade-grown coffee, and I'm hoping I get to hear her say, I had a farm in Africa. Okay, my Isaac Dennison jokes are trashing here. And then on October 26th, Valerie Stull from Community and Environmental Sociology will be here to talk about her work on eating insects for food. And the title of her talk is Tiny Bites for Health on Eating Insects and the Quest for Sustainable Protein. And then on November 2nd, Bridget Liddell from the UW-Madison Missing in Action program at the Biotech Center is going to talk with us about environmental DNA and recovering MIAs lost at sea. So those are going to be some pretty cool things. The full list is back on the piano. I look forward to doing that. Jeff, why don't you come on in? You can stand here so people can see you and see me. Oh, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So Jeff and I are hockey dads.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's how we got to know each other. Jeff is here to talk about his research for his PhD in the School of Education. And he's going to talk from STEM to STEM, toys, discipline, and creating sciencey and non-sciencey thinkers. Jeff, I ask everybody these 5 questions. Here comes the first one. You can answer in any way that you would like. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to be believable.
Okay, go ahead, shoot.
Where were you born?
I was born in Phillipsburg, New Jersey.
And then where'd you go for high school?
Phillipsburg High School.
And where'd you go for undergrad and what did you study?
Undergrad, I studied biology at Moravian, formerly college, now at Moravian University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
And then where'd you go for your advanced degrees?
My advanced degree, I did my my master's at the University of Pennsylvania in integrated science education. And then I landed here in UW for curriculum instruction, science education.
And you'll be finishing up later this semester.
I certainly hope so.
Good.
My wife certainly hopes so more than anyone. So, yes.
I tell you, don't feel the pressure.
No.
Would you please join me in welcoming Jeff Maddock to PLATO from Teaching Life Sciences?
Thank you very much. And thanks, Tom. I really am in awe with the way Madison has these organizations that just share information, and it's something that's just so important that I don't see a lot in other places where I've lived and things like that. So I really do appreciate Madison and the work you all do, and the work I know Tom does with what with the community and outreach and things like that. Excuse me. So my name is Jeff Maddock. I'm hopefully finishing up my PhD soon. And this process today of what I'm working on or what I'm talking about today has been quite therapeutic for me. And I thank Tom for inviting me today, just for the fact that sometimes with the work I was doing, I was getting so bogged down in so many details and histories and theories and everything else that I forgot the reason why I started to do this. It's because it's fun. It's toys. Right, it's thinking about kids and toys and playing with things and what all that looked like. So, so I thank him for inviting me, and I thank you all for listening to me. And as I said, this is really getting me back on a trend in my mind. So my research focuses on education and how we look at how we need to look at how we are creating potentials for children. What kind of potentials are we creating for children? I use the very fancy words, sciencey and non-sciencey. Those are very, those are just words that I kind of think of, and I kind of default to very simple words because of everything else. We have too many big words in what we do a lot of times. So I'm just thinking this is sciencey and non-sciencey. We think of kids who are sciencey, the kids who are, oh, that kid, does these things and they're good at math and they're good at this and they're good at that. And, oh, I'm not a sciencey person, or I'm not a math person. I'm not an artsy person. So I get really bothered by those sorts of things. Thinking about that, that's what I wanted to look into. And so I was thinking about, how do I approach this? How am I going to do this? Well, I was thinking we have curriculum and designs and all these things that we think about making kids sciencey, sciencey or non-sciencey kids, and what kind of things we are putting, presenting as science. And I started to think about different technologies that we have, and toys were one. We have, many STEM toys are one of the highest grossing market shares in the United States, and it's just a really big industry as far as wanting to get kids playing with STEM toys and things like that. So I started thinking about STEM toys. Here I have from Stern to STEM, because I didn't want to pass up a chance at a really, really good play on words. So I Stern to STEM, whatever. But the idea of discipline for me is the idea of what happens in schools and a lot of disciplines that we kind of don't think about. We go to school, we when we're young, we're standing in lines, we're waiting for bells, we're going by schedules. We are really disciplining kids in certain ways, which is fine and things that we have to do. But just thinking about ways that we discipline either very clearly or very, very just behind the scenes and these sorts of ideas. So my idea here is how can science look a little bit different? How can these ideas of science and the way we present science in the classrooms and the way we present science to kids through things like toys be a little bit different? So I'll talk about discipline later on. Right now, I just want to have some fun with this and talk a little bit of history, toys and education, things like that, which is what I wanted to kind of highlight today, just because it is it's supposed to be fun. So, oops, move on here. Okay, this is the Sears Wish Book, 1979. And if you looked at any of the links I sent you, there is one of digitized catalogs, Sears catalogs, wish books through the years. So you can go back and look through many years of toys and things like that. This was the next to Christmas time, next to Christmas morning. This was the big day, right? And as a millennial born in 1970, this was the thing that I looked at most of all, even over, anything, school books, anything else. This was the page I stared at from October to Christmas time. The corners were folded down so I could get to it very quickly, so I could look at these things, all these great things. You circle the things that you wanted and hope that Santa would bring them, right? Mom would bring them. Circle the ideas. Everything was circled on this page for me because I wanted everything. But that idea of, what does that idea of the excitement of it? And for me, this was a transformative time too, because this was a time when I started thinking about science fiction and science and possibilities of things. So what happened was, this time for me was all about Star Wars, all about space, all about thinking about these things and trying to relate these things. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I had many names. My last name is Maddock, so it was always Mad Dog or whatever. But when I was 9 years old, my sister started calling me Spaceman, and she called me Spaceman. She still calls me Spaceman. I'm 52. She still calls me Spaceman. So Spaceman, just because of this, and it was because of the idea of the stuff that I was thinking about in these times. So, yeah. So the things that were driving my research, I was good at math, loved science. I wasn't particularly good at physics and chemistry. I kind of was all right with those things. I love to think about physics, but I didn't like to do physics. I'd like to think about space and all those things, but I didn't like the numbers and everything else. And it was just a disconnect for me. So I started thinking about all this other stuff. I ended up being a biology person. Years later, I ended up as a biology teacher, worked in the city of Camden for 10 years, and found my joy in teaching. Eventually ended up here in Madison. And these are kind of the things that drive my research and the things I'm thinking about. Not everything is covered here or covered within my research, but ideas around STEM education. So STEM seems to be the thing. And what my wonderings are is what are we not getting when we get STEM as the space or the filling up the space of STEM. So STEM is, so what is STEM? STEM toys is educational technologies, the relationship between science, technology, and engineering, and how this relationship created ways to see and experience the otherwise and unseen and the unexperienced. What I mean by that is how do we make things appear through science and through ideas around STEM? And that goes into areas, I'm thinking about sociology, psychology areas, and ways that we kind of put numbers to things, and we kind of have these ideas about creating things, creating quantifications and things like that, and science, making them look like science. But how accurate are they, and what kind of problems might they cause in different areas? I'm also interested in how power moves through this massive entity we call the education system. What kind of things are happening, influencing science, things like politics, things live, politics recently with COVID and vaccinations and all that stuff. How these things are being shaped and presented in schools. And lastly, how forms of cybernetics and discourses around artificial intelligence describe ways in which we are taught to think and taught to learn, and how we experience science in schools. So a lot to bite off there, I know. So that's probably why I'm still kind of floundering right now with a lot of things, but I'm trying to hone this down, and like I said, trying to have fun with this as far as the idea of getting back to the toy things. So how many of you had blocks like these when you were growing up? So these were the Locke blocks. They were a product of John Locke. They were mixed in with my Legos. My mom had them. I don't know why she mixed them with my Legos, because they would just get them out of the way. I want to play with Legos. I'm going to look at the history here, starting off just the history of science, history of childhood, and a history of how we consider toys, how toys entered the picture here.
This is John Locke of Life, Liberty, and Property.
Yep. Yep. Social contract, all that good stuff. Yep. So I'm starting around the Enlightenment era here, and one of my favorite paintings is this. It's called Bird in an Air Pump. It's by John Wright of Derby, painted in 1768. And it kind of, for me, kind of wraps up the Enlightenment era. I had in my epistemology class that I teach, I had a person who knew a little bit about science history, and that person explained to me what this painting was showing, or what the historians would say about it. So here we have the dead bird in an air pump. We have horrified children looking on as the bird is suffocating in the air pump. We have light coming up onto the scientist's face, and the scientist just glaring out at us, challenging us to take away his power. And this powerful look of the enlightened scientist looking out, and the rationalization of the bird dying to the children, even though it's upsetting them. We have all kinds of cool things going on in this picture. And I bring this up because I want to start with Newton as an influencer. We have the influencers on social media and everything else. So I'm thinking of Newton as an influencer of this time, somebody who's everyone knows, everyone, you know, he has a lot of likes to his Twitter account or whatever the kids are using today. I don't know what they're using today. But this idea of Newtonian, the works of Newton coming in, quantifications and mathematics as the language of science, and this time just being this thing that we could grasp onto, this rationality. After years and years of unrest throughout Europe, we now have a rational way to deal with each other through science. So even Newton had the hero story of an apple falling down, and the mythology around that, and telling of a story, you know, that lasts to today of Newton's apple and all that good stuff, an ability for science to be able to solve nature, and demystifying science. So that was of interest as we're thinking about when science comes about, and now when does it come to the children. So in social thinking and social contracts that were written up at the time, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, all these folks creating these new social orders or social contracts, thinking about not just places of government and citizenship and all those things, but also where children fit into all this. Thinking of the idea of the child in a different way than they did in the Renaissance, making access to education into a thing that was going to bring knowledge through the masses to and through the masses, and the idea of classes, like I already said, set classes, social contracts, and that stuff there. So I kind of focus in on Rousseau and Locke and their ideas about education, especially their influence on Western education. The ideal experience for Locke was this idea of idea for Locke was this idea of learning through experience. You have to experience things in order to make them be. The child is a blank slate, or what they tabula rasa, which is what I have depicted up there, just a blank slate that you go into. The child's good, but they don't know anything. We need to fill them up with the ideas. So that it's like we're going to write our ideas out onto the child. So Locke, when we think about the way he was, what he thought about education, it was very regimented. The idea of play, here's what Locke said about play and how kids should play. Excuse me. Let a child be but ordered to whip his top at a certain time every day. Play with his top at a certain time every day, whether he has or has not a mind to it. Let this be required of him as a duty, and see whether he will not soon be weary of any play at this rate. It is not so with grown men. So this idea that we're going to have a child play themselves into boredom, to do something over and over again, it's kind of this idea of regimentation, an idea of you can play, but let's not make play the thing. Let's make it regimented, so it is part of a regimentation and disciplining of the child, and maybe they'll tire it, maybe they won't, but you do it every day at the same time. Interesting idea. Rousseau also thought children were inherently good, but Rousseau also thought that society was bad. What Rousseau wanted to do was keep the child away from society as long as you can, to raise the child kind of in the woods or isolated from society as much as possible, and let that child be introduced little by little into society, so that way they will start to get used to things. Once they're able to rationalize, once they're able to work through this society, they'll be able to understand things a little bit more. The same idea for both of them is this idea of the child being inherently good, but in need of being moralized. Somebody needs to put their morals into them. Somebody needs to teach them to be moral. So this idea that that there is this need for that. So that's our education part of it. Around the Enlightenment, I was trying to figure out at what point did we start to say science was important to children? And so science in children, of course, what we call science or whatever, it can be many different things. But the big push for science to be introduced to children came from a gentleman or a writer by the name of Tom Telescope. Now, obviously, that's not his real name. His name wasn't Tom Telescope. His name was actually John Newbery. So does anybody know who John Newbery was, or know what Newbery is famous for? Yes. Books. He was, the Newbery Award is right there. John Newbery was actually, they give out the Newbery Award for children's literature. John Newbery was Tom Telescope. And what the interesting thing about Tom Telescope was that it was geared towards children. So science for children and science books. Actually, a lot of the stuff that was in the books was probably over kids' heads, but he still put it in there. He didn't have a way of reasoning through those things. The Tom Telescope books ran for 80 years, reprinted in different formats. So very influential in the way kids were understanding, and not just kids, adults of certain class levels were also reading these books. So it was science for the masses, pretty much, not just aimed at kids. So this, according to the Cambridge Whipple Library, did a special collection on Tom Telescope. All aspects of natural knowledge were incorporated under this Newtonian designation because in popular science, Newtonism became synonymous with natural science, and the reputation of Newton sold books. So he was living kind of through a Tom Telescope name, but acting as a Newtonian figure in these books, and that's what sold the books, the popularity of Newton and all those ideas. Newton, through Tom, was upheld as a model for children to follow. So this disciplining idea of science as a disciplinary thing for children to emulate and become a part of. The books were also used to teach moral lessons, such as the dangers of gambling, the value of good manners, and gentlemanly behavior. And at the same time as introducing about natural philosophy. And in the beginning, Tom Telescope was a child prodigy. You see the picture of Tom. There's even younger pictures of Tom as a little, very, very young toddler teaching science. But that was a little, after a number of years, that became a little bit weird for adults to be reading about this young person teaching science. So Tom got a little bit older in the books and went from a childish individual to an older character. So the takeaways from the Enlightenment era: Enlightenment was an influence on the Western science and on education. Newtonian ways to be became ways of making sense and seeing the world. And just thinking about the idea of play, and we all think of play as being this freedom thing. Is play really liberating? That's kind of the places where I was thinking about when I came out of there. Okay. The aurora ray, I have such a hard time saying that word. I just thought that this was a really cool picture because I want to go up and play with that. I want to go up and play with that and push gears and pull things around. But it probably wasn't a toy, right? It's probably something else than a toy. As a matter of fact, most toys, a lot of toys weren't meant to be played with. A lot of toys were meant to be looked at and admired from afar. So leading into our next area, when do we get to play with toys? When do we actually get to touch things and pull things and play with things? And here I introduce Maria Edgeworth and the idea of the rational toy shop coming into the the 19th century, early 19th century. Froebel's gifts and hands-on learning. What did that look like? If you're familiar with some Montessori histories, some ideas come from Froebel's gifts, and also the modern child, the delinquents down there who are shooting marbles in the streets and getting run over and causing problems in the streets and scaring horses and all that stuff that those terrible kids did back in the day. I say that jokingly because that's just kind of the idea that we had about children, or that they had about children at the time. So the Rational Toy Shop, Mary Edgeworth from 1768 to 1849, said toys were meant to be played with. Imagine that. So that idea that toys were meant to be used and played with and utilized. This kind of idea, the toy shops and the toys that were being less crude and more developed, more modeled and more sculptured and with technologies and things. Toys, access to toys expanded. So more kids had access to toys. Excuse me. We started to see commodification of toys, which is important. Toys became children's property. Children didn't have any kind of property. Now we're starting to see this idea of commodification of toys. And actually, this started gendering toys, which is nothing new, but design gendering of toys, and toys being for girls and boys, and those sorts of ideas. On the other side there, in the schools, we have hands-on learning from from Froebel. Froebel was the person who came up with the concept of the kindergarten, which we owe to Froebel. Through Froebel's gifts, we're going to see the idea of child development. And you may have heard of Piaget and ideas of that child development here through Froebel's gifts and the kind of gifts that you get, the kind of toys that you are allowed to play with through certain levels of experience. Froebel's gifts are also important to a lot of art movements, the Bauhaus movement, and also somebody named Frank Lloyd Wright, who is, I was very excited to move to Madison and went to see all the Frank Lloyd Wright inspired designs around the area. Mary Edgeworth and Rachel's toy shop. One of the first universal toys, or one of the first toys that most talked about, was the toy that was brought out around Christmas time every year, was the Noah's Ark, and the idea of the Noah's Ark, and that a lot of households had that, and that was something that children would sort of, before there were regular toys, they would go and start playing with those things. So Noah's Ark probably kind of brought it, that idea of children playing and actually allowed to play with toys and playing with these things. And then we have good old Saint Nick there. So at this time period, the mid 1800s, Clement Clark Moore wrote the poem "A Visit from Saint Nick," and we start to see the idea of Christmas and presents and toys and children and all these things that are coming about, along with the affordability and ideas that people could get on board of, was this idea of the rational toy shop. And I put in this little graphic of gendering of toys. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Meanwhile, Froebel's gifts were, like I said, gifts that were given at certain points. You can see each box is marked with a number. Each box, when you open it up, the first one was soft little spheres that children, that babies can play with and roll and learn all these ideas from. And as you progress through levels, you would start to work your way through different gifts. So they were explained this way. The active and creative living and life producing being of each person reveals itself in the creative instinct of the child. All human education is bound up in the quiet and conscious nurture of this instinct of activity and the ability of the child to this instinct to be active. So the idea behind Froebel's gifts was this idea of the child doing things. One of the things that I think a lot about when we talk about science is people always say, well, science has to be hands-on, science. A lot of times that's, and I don't disagree with that, but a lot of times that kind of covers up a lot of the other things in science, the ideas of thinking about things or thinking about what you're doing, and the idea of manipulations and of things with your hands sometimes don't follow with the mind. So I'm kind of interested in going down that line of thinking about things. But that's for another day. Gender science, I'll make a big jump here. So gendered science, I just wanted to make a jump here and take a look at some of these things. Thought that this was a fascinating venture where we have the chemistry set where you have the chemist there. And then for the girls, you have the lab technician, right? So the chemistry set, who gets to do chemistry and who gets to do the work of chemistry?
What years are these?
This is probably, these are from very different years. This is a much later year. This is probably from, I'd probably say a 30s.
Post-World War II?
Right around the time. I'm not sure on the exact times. But yeah, so this idea of who gets to do what in chemistry is interesting there. And even when we kind of say, yeah, it's a little off-putting, we can look at other things too and think about ways we draw kids in and whether they're the right ways or wrong ways, because we have here the perfume lab for women, for young girls. The lip balm and the crystal spa lab have both a male and female picture on it, but the perfume lab is female. So just thinking of ideas of those things and how we think we can draw kids into science and make them sciencey or non-sciencey, going back to that idea. This is something I didn't realize Barbie Mattel put out, was the science COVID scientists collection, which I thought was fantastic. I didn't realize that existed. I wanted to draw attention to that as being just a really interesting idea anyway to present how play happens with that, and play becomes a really important thing. How do kids play with these things becomes an idea of the connection between what connects to the kids and what doesn't. Here we see the doctors and nurses kits in pink and blue and all that good stuff. I put Star Wars up there for one particular reason. Number one, a big Star Wars guy. Number two, the retro makes me feel really old. It's like when I put on the oldies station and my songs are playing. I didn't expect that to hurt so much the heart, but the idea of retro there, but the idea of the thing called the action figure, because we had to call them action figures, not dolls. And there's still, saw an article recently about a guy who had a G.I. Joe collection. They said, don't call them dolls, they're action figures, which kind of I thought was interesting and gendered in these ideas of what we do. Checking my time there. Okay. Cool. So just to recap of the toys in the 19th century, toys become accessible, commodified. We have Santa, we have possession, we have people marketing toys and ideas, become children's property. Salvation. So I didn't talk a whole lot about the streets of the early, late 1800s, early 1900s, but toys were a way of getting kids off the streets. They're a way to play at home. Street crime was seen as this terrible thing. We have the Horatio Alger stories of saving kids and all this bad stuff that's happening out in the streets and juvenile delinquents and things like that. Toys became, with accessibility, became a way of kids playing at home. They became status symbols of families and those things of that nature. And the idea of gendering has always been there. But now we're starting to see design-specific gendering coming into play in some of these places. So into the next section. Excuse me, while I grab a drink of water. So the idea, I'm jumping back and forth between toys and science and toys. Science education. So when we start to get into the 1900s, we start thinking about science in a different way. Science is now something that's, of course, helping us in industry, helping us build and create and become this exemplar nation and Eastern European nations of all the exemplars. So the ideas of defense start to come through. Sciences, of war and security and defenses. And economies and such. We also see science coming into the school. So scientists come into the classroom. What does science look like when it's coming into the classroom? How does it look different with all this influence of national defense, national progression? How does science become this thing that looks a little bit different? And how does science start to create experts and ways and things of what we know as the Western way to be. I have here in that last picture, my third chapter is on what Levi Strauss, the anthropologist, calls the Brick-O-Lear, which is a kind of a savage, it's in a Savage Lives book by Levi Strauss, but kind of this savage engineer who builds from cultural and historical references rather than looking forward and progressive and kind of meeting the needs of those who pose the questions and pose the problems. So for me, it was a way to understand engineering through the eyes of something that wasn't an engineer. And I just used that in one of my chapters. That I don't get into a lot of that, but that's something I just wanted to put forward. So science as a discipline, how and why is it constructed to go through the schools? Of course, you have Oppenheimer there. We have the business ideas there. We have Sputnik. We have Mr. Jonas Salk, who is my son is named after, my son Jonas, who I've always been an admirer of Mr. Salk, and with the vaccinations and all that good stuff that we've seemed to lost a little bit of focus on as of late. But these ideas of science becoming something different, becoming politicized, some of it becoming about fear. We're afraid. We're afraid of what Sputnik can do. We're afraid of wartime. We're afraid of different things, even to the point of in this picture right down here, we're afraid of people, and people getting on airplanes. We're afraid of people coming over borders. We have technologies to go after to help us with our fears of things. So science becomes this thing that kind of has a little bit of connection or connection to ideas of fears. The fears of war during these times. And then towards the 80s, when I was going to school, it was a fear of economic collapse. So the idea of science becoming this physical battle of war and this idea of beating the Russians to space and all these cool physical things now becomes an idea of we don't have enough scientists to do this or that, whether it be about security or be about economics. That kind of shift really made me think about science in schools. Yeah, So I'll get to him. Yeah. So what I started thinking about was, okay, so what's changing here? What kind of things are changing in education? Up here in the top left, I have a shop class. And right next to it, I have a maker's class, makerspace. So why is makerspace any different from a shop class? What are they doing in a makerspace class that they're not doing in a shop class? What are they doing in vocational schools where they're teaching electronics or teaching electrical technicians as compared to what they're doing in a physics classroom teaching about electricity? Where's the disconnect there? Why can't certain kids be one? Why are we putting kids here or there? Why are we putting sciencey kids there, non-sciencey kids there? And that's what I started thinking about. Technology enters the classroom, of course, and a lot of the pictures that I saw of early technology in the classrooms talk about gifted and talented classrooms. Technology wasn't going into all classrooms because of the expenses. Access was a little bit less. And of course, technology or science was coming out to television. It was there for a long time, as Mr. Wizard was on the air. How long was Mr. Wizard on the air for?
I don't know.
Yeah, so many years. So I caught him towards the end of his career, but the idea of science being so important that it's coming into TVs, education being so important that cartoons at around this time, FCC regulations put regulations on cartoons where they have to have a certain amount of educational content to it and standards that were happening around the 80s. So this idea of education, especially science education, permeating through to create my generation. This is when I was growing up, and we had those big computers and big floppy disks were huge and all that good stuff. But just some wonderings that I.
Well, Mr. Wizard graduated from UW lacrosse.
Oh, did he really? Oh, wow.
You got 2 Wisconsin people actually.
Oh, there you go. I did not know that. So just things that go along with the idea of sciencey or not, the idea of science education. We have a lot of math gateways. We miss out on a lot of kids because we let math be the ruler of who gets to be in science classes, advanced science classes, and who doesn't. It's not a matter of the thought process or any other way of thinking or doing or anything else. It's the mathematics. We reconstruct tools and technologies to think of them as STEM tools or STEM toys or STEM classes. And we don't think about the kids who are doing wonderful things in different places in the schools that are, using all these technologies. The way media and education kind of presents science and science education is kind of disconnected from what I see in the classroom is kids who can but don't think they could because of the way we position them. So what's the difference in who gets to do science? The idea between science and technicians. In that pictures before, the young man could be the chemist, the girl had to be the technician. What's the difference there? Why is it, what's the difference between a technician and a scientist, and why is there these disconnects in those places? Where do we draw those lines? So just some things I was thinking about. So science education through this time, entity of concern. This is something that people worry about and make decisions on and make policies about, and all these things. What actually counts as science is whose science is best, all those other ideas of what science is. When we get into schools, we deal with science in very particular siloed areas. My master's was in integrated science. It was one of the places where it made sense to me finally. Science finally made sense to me as a overarching idea, not this idea of chemistry, not this idea of this, of a physics class and a biology class. It all works together. Oops. So going in deeply into what I'm trying to figure out is this idea of technology, science, and engineering, and how these things loop in with each other to create these trajectories that we all live with right now. Right now in the present, we have these trajectories of technology, science, and engineering that are kind of telescopic. This is where at the end, where if we took another left or right during any decision-making time, we can be in very different places. Also, the idea of a lot of times of a perception or looking back and saying, okay, well, we collected this data. Data collection is great. Like, I'm not saying data collection is wrong or anything like that, but a lot of times we make too many assumptions out of very complex systems through looking back at data in science, but we do it in classrooms. We try to make data speak to us in ways that really hurt kids, I think, in a lot of different ways. We try to put kids in certain categories. Just classroom data of language learners, classroom data of kids with IEPs, kids who score on different tests and things, and where we place them in schools. So those ideas of looking back and creating something that doesn't necessarily exist, but we just use the data to make it exist because it existed in a lot of other places. So if it's about 90% of kids who, whatever percentage is, we're going to play percentage in statistics, but we're actually affecting kids' lives by trying to put numbers to things that we're not sure we can put numbers to. I question the numbers that we put to kids sometimes. And it's the best way. We have to do things a lot of other ways. So I'm not saying that data is a wrong thing or to try to figure out things from data. What I'm saying is that sometimes we apply it in ways that we need to take a look back on, especially when we apply it to students and ideas and ways, complex systems like kids, complex systems like computers, and we see Google algorithms that are that people say, well, we don't know how it works. It just works. Well, it just works because we're looking at the last piece of it and saying, okay, well, that makes sense to me. So we're going to say it works, but we don't really know. So that I think we need to be critical on those things. And I think that's the cornerstone of what, excuse me, what I'm thinking about here, especially when I show you what what inspired me to talk about this as a STEM idea and STEM toys and all these things.
What's the fourth quadrant, the green quadrant in the stem? I see a gear, a drafting board, a light bulb. What's the fourth?
I can't see it from where I am. My thing is too small.
Supposed to be the science one.
I think it's an atom. I think it's an atom model.
It is.
Yep.
More Adam. The boring Adam.
Which I find funny because of the idea of, the ideas of even using something that's not quite accurate as being representative of STEM as a thing. So like the Bohr atom model, things like that. So, yeah. So thinking about this, the way that we kind of scientized or made into science these ways of thinking and knowing, and we kind of took this idea of the brain as this mechanical thing, and the idea of the body-mind Cartesian dualism idea. It's obviously not something new, but this idea of these systems that we try to simplify so we can make them explain things and things like that, kind of leads me to where I got into toys and thinking about toys. This is a Digicomp 1. Did anybody ever see one of these or have one of these? This is a mechanical toy computer from the 60s. And it was obviously a lot of gears and a lot of switches and things like that. That was a counting machine and able to do simple mathematics and things like that. The same person who designed the Digicomp also introduced us to Mr. Nim, the amazing Mr. Nim, who can beat you at a game of his design, a marble game where you drop marbles down and they switch back and forth. And the idea was to have the last marble, the last two marbles or something, be of a certain way. But Mr. Nim was a way of kind of replicating sort of an early human intelligence that kids could play with and be impressed by the fact that they can always get beaten by something that's not a human, and they could be outfought by something that's different. But we take those ideas and we look at the computer, we think, whoa, here's this computer, something very vast. And but the computer works kind of in the same way as these mechanics do. So if we think of a computer working like our brains or not, they're still using switches in the forms of transistors and the way things are moving through a computer. It's just at a really, really high level, or at a very expanded level. It's no different. It's just a matter of switches, ones and zeros, binaries, the way things move through the computers. So my question is that with all these systems being either being engineered or trying to be understood in certain terms, what does that look like? And when it gets too big, how do we know it's working correctly? And how do we know it's doing things that we want it to do? So what my interest was, and the thing that brought me to all of this was this product called the Turing Tumble, of course, after Alan Turing. And what this does, it is a mechanical computer, created mechanical computer. Discover, see, and feel how a computer operates, and play all these challenges. So there's a book that comes with this, comic book, very well written, nicely illustrated, that has students working through these ideas of computer processes. The developer from Minnesota, he was a University of Minnesota, I think he was a chemistry teacher, was seeing how kids weren't really good at programming. So he wanted to develop something for programming for kids, which is important for a lot of sciences these days, of course. This thing has wide distribution in schools. And the concept of this is one representation. What they say is for this toy to replicate a real computer, you'd have to cover the state of Texas with these. So imagine that box covering the state of Texas. That's what the complexity of it is. So that got me to thinking. This is great, by the way. It's a lot of fun to play with. Highly recommended for young ones. It got me thinking, what can be learned from this? Okay, so we can learn programming from it. We can learn the idea of this being a representation of mechanics, but also the way that we think about computers, and a lot of times the way we think about the human mind working. We can think about the physical limitations of this based on non-exponential growth, based not on exponential growth and defining what, I'm sorry. Thinking about this non-exponential growth and dividing what we know and what possibilities are open as we think about this thing working, covering the state of Texas, a bunch of these things working in unison, and what kind of things are happening in those places in different areas of a computer that are, are they mechanical? Are they doing things that are, maybe not quite right, or might be off a little bit, or, the idea of garbage in, garbage out? Well, we got to also consider the people programming, the people who are setting up the constructions of the insides of everything, and making sure everything is working quite right, not just looking at the end product and say, okay, this looks good, let's go with it. And the other idea I have was about thinking about complex systems and how our views of objectivity often depend merely on the outputs rather than the complexities themselves overall. And I think that that's where I kind of think about this and think about trying to quantify brains and souls and ideas and motivations and things that we all talk about kids having or not having, or having certain levels, or having certain calculations of motivation levels and all kinds of things that come into play when we think about the complex system of a human being, and how we can maybe rethink some of that and be a little bit more inclusive and bring the sciencey and non-sciencey people together. I'm losing my voice, so that's a perfect time to end all this. Thank you very much. I'd love to take some questions about science in general, science education in general, I mean. I do work with student teachers here. I've been in all the schools, so anything science education wise, or anything to try to clarify anything that was kind of mushed up here. Yes. Yes.
All the kids these days have got a computer in their hand.
Yep.
Is that gonna change the way they imagine things? Is that going to improve it? What's your opinion?
I was, when I was teaching in Camden, I was a big advocate. I taught in a district that wasn't a lot of money. Very few kids had their own phones and stuff, but a number that I could. I was an advocate for the use of that in groups as another computer, right? The technology right here was more than what put a man on the moon, right? It's just in my pocket right here, or something very similar to it. But that idea of getting that technology in the hands of kids lets us think about not about the mundane memorization and the facts. They could all look them up. They could all look up any Avogadro's number, whatever they want to look up right here. It's about now taking it and how do you use it? And I'm a big advocate for that. The only problem is that sometimes, TikTok's more interesting than doing mitosis or doing certain calculations and things.
There are no kiddie phones.
No kiddie
Give
phones.
your kid a phone, it's the same phone as your phone.
And I think that's really one of the things that's remarkable, what the big is. I- It's not a toy anymore, it's the real authentic thing. And the kids play with it, but not because it's a toy phone, but because it's a real phone connected to the real internet and all that good stuff. And I think it's unbelievably different.
Yeah, so with that being different, then I'm interested to know, like, like that differentiation, like you would want it to be more specialized towards like a child, like
No,
user. Okay,
I mean, you watch little kids tap things, because they're at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, they're already knowing that they can tap and drive things.
it's intuitive, right?
That's not science. It's not science.
I'm sorry.
How does that relate to science?
How is that?
Right, helping kids develop a love of science.
I
Self-
yeah. How is it not helping with science?
No, how does it? How does it?
Oh, it just gives you the knowledge that it gives you.
You ask a scientist, what is science?
Hmm?
A scientist.
Mhm.
And they will not say that science is a collection of information.
Right.
They will say science is a verb.
Yep.
That's how you think. So how does it? When we do that?
So I would say that a lot of science education is about that information taking up the space of the actual actions of science. So the memorization of a formula in a physics class, rather than how do you apply it, becomes very different when you have that information that you know where to grab it from, how to utilize it, and then how to do the science with it, rather than this is just an encyclopedia. This is just giving you information. Correct. Yeah, that's
Well, but I
Right.
had Wikipedia and I couldn't talk into it, couldn't talk back to me. And the amazing thing is what I'm seeing.
No, I understand all that. It's about children and science.
Okay.
Not about children handed an encyclopedia that they can address any way they want.
So when I read the World Book, I had to take it as it is.
Yeah.
When I watch my kids, they're driving the phone. And not just saying, oh, what am I gonna look up, but they have to figure out how it works, they have to figure out how they can share things, and many times the makers. To be able to do the programming and video production,
That's,
that's all amazing.
yeah, it's amazing, but it's not science.
but for what I was seeing in my classroom, from what I was seeing in my classroom, I can make students make decisions about how to do science, make decisions about science, tell me how they're understanding it without those facts getting in the way, because they have access to them. I would rather kids have access to already known scientific facts. That way, when they go down a line of reasoning of trying to explain something, I can say, well, let's look at this, this, and this. And you have that at your fingertips of being able to do it. My want was actually use this technology. I wanted them to be able to merely use a video camera to show me mitosis using a video and making a video of it. And this was many years ago, and now I'm sure that, that those things are all over the place, but just the idea of using technology that's there, the information that's there, but also teaching them how to use this as the tool, where to go for things, how to use and how to find information that's accurate, and how to find information that's making that not holding their hands and saying, go here, here, and here, but what do you think, where do you think you're going to find that? What kind of things, what kind of questions do you have? And really making it clarified. It helps to clarify when you get all the trivia out of the way, the facts stuff. If you get that stuff out of the way and say that that's not going to be an issue that you have to sit there and memorize, then it becomes, for me as a science teacher, a lot easier to focus in on the idea of science as the verb, as you said, as that push.
So when I took organic chemistry 55 years ago, in college. 60 years ago. Everyone hated it, because it was, so we'd have, did you take organic chemistry? Right, and you had a memorize, the part that made it so awful was that you had to memorize the whole world of organic molecules.
Yep.
And you had to get short shrift to why chemical reactions took place, or which ones took place. So there's an example of a phone where you have all the information. You don't have to memorize it anymore. And it's certainly advanced. How you would teach the science.
Absolutely. I took organic chemistry in the 90s, and it was the same thing. And it never got any better. And then when I did my integrated science education class, one of the courses was taught by an organic chemistry teacher, and she talked about this idea of what organic chemistry was, and I never knew what it was. I thought it was just memorizing stuff and taking stuff off and putting stuff on. And I mean, I just I don't need to memorize every crayon in the box. I need to know how to use these things and how they go together, and where that works. So absolutely. And I think that's where, as long as you can battle with the disruptions, I think that this is a key to, we see, iPads in the classroom now and computers in the classroom in different ways.
This one. The other good thing about the phone is that kids learn how to find things out.
Yeah.
And that can be translated to any kind of interest. It isn't confidence.
And there's also a lot of cutting and pasting going on. So you have to watch out for that too. Yeah, it's too easy. Yes. I got
Some years ago, I remember hearing people say, well, instead of having a whole year of geometry, it should be a half year of geometry and a half year of programming. To get high school kids to program, but I really don't see much programming going on in high school.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because of teachers don't know how to program or because that is a when you think of like the say Raspberry Pi, it's a little, not now there's some supply chain issues, but you can get them for like $20 and they've got with a couple and a keyboard with a couple cables. You can simple like Python programming, you can control little LEDs, all kinds of things. But I don't see much of programming being taught before college.
I think so. Two things with that. The way I'm kind of at odds with myself in that is until I discovered this, and the gentleman who introduced this, not realizing how much coding was as part of science today in colleges. So no matter what science you do, you go for it, you're going to be, a lot of times you're going to be asked to do things that you need to know, coding and programming things, ideas like that. Where I kind of think about that is the idea of coding for just for jobs and things like that. I kind of have, I have a very practical way about myself, but I fell into the ideas for way too long of school being for something that is a fleeting part of technology that might not be there. And I mean, I think I like the ideas of kids coding, but I also like the idea of kids having, I would love science history and science. I love philosophy classes in schools as well. So all those ideas that well-rounded kids rather than geared towards certain technologies, which I know they're going to be there for a long time, but if they, what happens if they aren't, or what have you, what kind of things do kids have to know in order to know coding? And let's work on the meta of that, maybe. I don't know. Yes, sir.
I had a recent experience, I don't know if it's science or technology or whatever, but I was living with my 5-year-old grandson. He said, "Grandpa, you want to see my farm?" He pulled up a computer screen where he had a farm, he had his fields, his tractor, his truck, all this kind of stuff. And then he said, "Well, if I sell all this corn over here this year, I can buy a computer, or not a computer, a combine. But if I sell half my wheat, then I can get a tractor." And he's talking economics as a 5-year-old. To learn how to screen.
Isn't that great?
I'm just thinking like that.
I mean,
The kid, I probably
I do, I've learned a lot from computers growing up in the 80s, and I had the same computer that Elon Musk had, the Commodore 64 he talks about. The only thing was I was playing games on it and fighting dragons and dungeons, and he was programming it and figuring things out. So not that that's anything, whatever, but the idea of technology and what draws us in, the idea of a farm drawing us into economics, and the idea of goals and earning money or getting followers on TikTok, or what are the things that motivate, and these ideas of motivation that are so, we think of motivation in a lot of different ways, and we try to define it. And I think that's a lot of what I have trouble with, is the idea of science defining motivations, but they're existing, right? That the child is really motivated to do that, maybe because the child doesn't understand that it's something that is important, but it's just something that they want to do. And that's the idea, with play. Is it something that's forced, or is it something that we coerce, or is it something that we just do?
This is like a lot of play you can just kind of do by yourself. You got the gadget. Fiddle around there.
Yeah.
But it seems like a real important part of going into science too is like collaboration. Multiple people working on the same gadget, or you each work on your gadget, and then you come and talk about what happened. So it seems like that kind of collaboration is an important part of science. Rather than just doing it on your own, you're not going to get that far.
I remember a principal walking past my science room, walking in and coming up to me saying, "Mr. Maddock, your class is a little loud today." I'm like, "Yeah, but listen to what they're saying. They're talking, they're talking about science, they're collaborating, they're talking about what they're doing. They're not talking about, the baseball game, or what, Kanye West is up to, or whatever. They are talking about science." And he said, "Oh, yeah, you're right." I said that's what science is. It's part of science is that collaboration that we sometimes we let school discipline out of. I mean, we're a lot better at it now than we were back in my day, where you sat down and you learned facts and you filled in worksheets and you did all those things. We're getting a lot better.
When I think about, like, I taught in elementary school back in the 70s, and like fifth graders that they're thinking about, well, how does exponentiation, what's 2 to the power of 0? And half it will say 1, half will say 0. And just the argument they can have about it is really productive. You could say, should we vote about it? Then fight about it? But not now. They just punch it in on their computer. Oh, I know the answer, and you miss out on that discussion that's kind of important for developing a collaboration.
I would rather they not walk out not knowing whether it was 1 or 0, but both sides having a great argument.
Yeah. Just then, how do you resolve that argument?
Yeah, punch it up on a computer.
The kids got a lot out of that. I really enjoyed seeing some of the scenarios that played out.
That's some complex reasoning right there, right? I mean, it's how do you even reason that? I only know it because I know it, right? I don't know why that is. I'm sure that a lot of you probably can explain it to me, but I have no idea. I know that it's 1, but I don't know why.
Using the additive law for exponents.
Yep. Yes.
I had never seen this during the fall.
Yeah.
And I just went on Amazon and see what, do I buy one or what? It isn't even there.
It's not, well, it's not on Amazon. They sell them through their own website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they,
You buy something else that does similar, but
it was a GoFundMe. It took off real well. He sells through his own, setup. They have, sets and teacher instructions and all kinds of ways, to bring it into the schools. It's just a really interesting, concept. It is. I've learned what was it? Turing completeness. It's a Turing completeness. They label it as. It's a constantly running as the marbles drop down and flip switches. It actually triggers the next one to come down, and or it can trigger. It could cross over and trigger the other side. I was running out of time, so I didn't want to. I didn't go through it all. I was probably going to throw up a video of it if, or you could just throw up a video of your own if you'd like. But those ideas of just mechanical, just the mechanics of this, and just the idea of a toy that, kids can be engaged in and think about different things rather than just the outcomes of what it is. So,
Got a question online?
Yes, sir.
Fan router, are you using pronoun analysis to look at newspapers year by year for STEM thoughts? And so he's looking at gender and pronoun.
yeah, I am not. That's a great question. I was for there's a lot of data out there that really points to our shortcomings as far as gender goes, as far as marginalized people go, and that's part of the idea behind thinking about sciencey and non-sciencey. Again, words that I kind of just made up and don't hold them to any kind of high academic high standard. But no, I did not. That's a great suggestion, though. I would like to think about that and take a look into that.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, next week. Okay.
get a sample on that one. I don't want to sample butter.
As long as it's Irish coffee, I'll do it.
But that's not sample insects.
I have the insects and food.